Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video is how to get lean and how to get hollow cheeks. And there will be 13 methods listed down. So the first method is going to be cutting. Second method is caffeine. Third method is restricting your sodium intake. 4 is potassium powder. 5 is lymphatic drainage. 6 is eplerenone. 7 is diuretics. 8 is retatrutide. 9 is cryolipolysis, fat freezing. 10 is aqualic spot injections, 11 is liposuction, 12 is digoxin, 3 is buccal fat removal. So again, from the disclaimer, this is all for educational purposes and also for everybody to understand all the options a person can take. And within the looks maxing community, this is why I see. So this video might be helpful for you guys, but let's get into the video, shall we? Some of the content in this video will be water to some people, but please sit through. It's going to advance in difficulty and in uniqueness, to say the least. Number 1 is cutting. To start off with cutting, the most basic method of how to get lean and have hollow cheeks, preferably 1 hour of cardio per day with the diet. Beware. This might not work because of the buccal fat pads that are determined by genetics. So even if you cut down to 8% body fat, you still may be screwed because of those fat pads. But overall, generally, if you do cut and lose fat, you generally would lose facial adiposity. You should cut by having a calorie deficit, which means that you're going below your maintenance levels that is determined by your metabolism and energy expenditure. For me, I do something more or less extreme. I go on a very low-carb diet for months to let my body easily go into ketosis. I go and eat a pound of ground beef per day. Protein would also seem to increase your metabolism because it requires more energy to break down proteins than fats and carbs by around 20 to 30% in terms of protein. But your baseline protein should be around 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. So that would mean if you are 200 pounds, you should at least eat 140 grams of protein. This is not an exact rule because body fat percentages will differ, but try to stick to this rule. Here are the footnotes. I'll also be reading some footnotes because they are very crucial in your understanding of the major points that I'm going to make, and there's 13 of them. Now, for the sub-points for major point number 1, cutting, and it is the cutting technique of chewing on a towel. Towel chewing would tell your brain that it is eating something even though it is not. This would also be beneficial for your ascending journey because you are also training your masseter muscles. The reasoning behind this is that the physical act of mastication, which is chewing, sends signals to your brain that helps regulate appetite and satiety, which means feeling full. And you're chewing on a towel even without ingesting food, right? And the brain needs time around 20 minutes to register fullness. The prolonged motor activity of chewing stimulates neural pathways that can increase the production of gut hormones that promote satiety, or satiation of hunger, such as cholecystokinin, or CCK for short, and glucagon-like peptide 1. This will also allude to the future points I'm going to make, especially on retatrutide, so stay tuned for that. While decreasing the hunger hormone ghrelin, and that will also relate to MK677 in another video I'm going to make. And these are the footnotes. Second point for the major point of cutting, and this is eating slowly. You have to eat slowly when eating a meal. Thus, your body can feel more full and crave less, because you're giving your brain time, around 20 minutes, to receive and process signals of fullness from hormones like leptin and CCK, which again is cholecystokinin. When you eat quickly, you can consume more calories than your body needs before these satiety signals have a chance to reach your brain. But slowing down allows you to become more attuned to your body's cues and stop eating when you're satisfied and not being uncomfortably full. These are the footnotes. Point number 3 for the major point of cutting. This is called the random fill-up method. This is basically when you're craving something in the middle of the day, you randomly fill up your body with something that gives you dopamine, but in small amounts, by eating it very slowly to savor and relieve your dopamine-fried brain. Or another option is that you ingest high amounts of low-calorie substances like water, or low-calorie foods like carrots to get rid of the craving and hunger combined. But note that there is a difference between being hungry and craving for something. Have that self-control and don't let such minuscule evolutionary cues govern and control your life. Be better than that. The fourth sub point is one meal. 1 meal per day is a method that I personally developed that helped me cut weight. This is effective because you eat in the middle of the day or in the morning, which will effectively make you hungry and go into ketosis around the time when you're going to sleep. But this is only if you're consistently cutting for a long period of time. And once you're hungry, you can just sleep it out without trying to deal with the hunger for the entire day, which means that it is an easy 6 to 7 hours.
6 and 7.
Of a hungered state being marked down effortlessly. If you don't feel hungry after that, you should keep on going until you feel hungry, and then eat in the middle of the day or the next morning. Subpoints number 5. 2 half meals per day is for those who really cannot control their hunger, but they want to get their calorie intake down and still have some dopamine and hunger suppressant capabilities later down the line for each day. This means that you eat once in the morning and once in the middle of the day. You can spread the meals to be directly 12 to 6 hours apart. Just remember, this is less effective, but at the end of the day, this will be a better method for those who can't control themselves that much. Sometimes I use this method and eat half a pound of ground beef per serving. Now, major point 2, which is caffeine. Caffeine is a useful substance for hunger suppression and a sense of energization. So if you do feel hungry and tired in the middle of the day, you should ingest caffeine. Various sources like coffee, tea, and pre-workout are sources that you can get your caffeine intake in. But for me personally, I go for a scoop of pre-workout to suppress hunger because it's highly convenient. You're just scooping it out and putting in water, mixing it, drinking it, voila. Caffeine can suppress appetite by influencing hormones to regulate hunger, such as increasing the satiety hormone, peptide YY, or PYY for short, while decreasing the hunger hormone, ghrelin. But this is a side note. Some clinical literature has shown conflicting results to my claim that caffeine is a hunger suppressant, but there is still reasoning and backing to my claim. But for some people, they feel sleepier and more hungry from caffeine, so test this method out. If it has desired results, stick with it. If it does not, then why should you use it? Throw it away. Method number 3, restrict your sodium intake. The point of restricting your sodium intake is to reduce the bloat that you get in the morning usually, but the bloat may last for a whole day or multiple days. To solve this, stay away from sodium or salt or anything that is salty related. To note, you cannot fully halt your sodium intake, but you can keep it on a low to not have such a bloated look that will hurt your perceived leaned out appearance. A bloat is just intracellular bloating or facial swelling, and the fancy term for facial swelling is edema or swelling in general, and intercellular means in between cells. High sodium intake effects. So this is something that you shouldn't do, to have high sodium intake. Now, if you do the opposite with a high sodium intake, you are f***ing yourself in the ass. With high sodium intake, you're increasing your blood sodium concentration levels, thus meaning you're increasing your ADH release and thirst, thus meaning you're increasing your water reabsorption and increasing your water intake, thus meaning you're increasing your blood volume and capillary hydrostatic pressure, thus meaning the net fluid shifts out of the capillaries into the interstitial tissues, which will cause edema, thus meaning it will give you facial bloating in the loose facial tissues, especially after lying down with water going to the face in bed. And this is the general overview. And the footnotes. As you can see, it's fairly long, like holy fuck. I'll just be reading some points so you could still have some knowledge absorption of this without sitting there and reading. So for the general overview, the mechanism for this phenomena to happen is that high sodium intake causes the body to retain more sodium, in turn water to keep up the balance of fluids and electrolytes in a healthy range. Where sodium goes, water goes too, to balance things out. But it negatively in turn makes us bloated. Thus, this is a balancing mechanism. Now, osmosis. It is the movement of solvent molecules through a selectively permeable membrane from a region of high water potential to a region of low water potential, in the directions that tend to equalize the solute concentrations on two sides. Now I'll be reading on the RAAS system and aldosterone, so you will have better understanding of the future topics that I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, on to the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, the RAAS. So this is the body's switch for long-term blood pressure and bloating control. in simplicity, the cascade of hormones that affect from first to last is renin, angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, aldosterone, and ADH. Aldosterone regulates blood pressure and maintains the balance of electrolytes and sodium, also potassium too. It is an amplifier for sodium and water reabsorption while increasing potassium excretion. Thus, higher aldosterone will equate higher blood pressure by causing the kidneys to retain sodium and water. This is because aldosterone produced in the adrenal glands, it signals your kidneys to reabsorb sodium back into the bloodstream, which means that it tells your body to retain sodium while simultaneously excreting potassium as the price. Also, all the hormone interplays for bloat that are major are antidiuretic hormone, ADH, aldosterone, which is the sodium elevator, angiotensin 2, that's the vascular constrictor, renin, that's the RAAS kickstarter, and then there's ANP, which is the arterial natriuretic peptide. And off of context, you could understand what ANP does. Number 4, potassium powder or potassium maxing. Another way to have hollower cheeks is to use potassium powder to debloat, or any source of potassium. As you can see, I have hollow cheeks right now. Even without sucking them in, you can still see the lack of face fat here. This happens because potassium counters sodium, because it helps the body to excrete excess sodium through increased urine production. But usually you need to use potassium in a simplified concentrated form, which is opposite of that of bananas, avocados, or potatoes, which all have potassium, but they are less concentrated and are filled with more calories. You should eat around 26.5 milligrams per pound of potassium. This is because the average person in 2004 is 177 pounds, for males and females, combining them together and averaging out the weight. And I'll get to why 2004 is mentioned. And that the daily recommended intake should be around 4,700 milligrams to compensate for the modern high sodium processed diets. So if you're withholding yourself from sodium, eat less than 4,700 milligrams per day of potassium. Potassium concentration differences, and this is between low potassium intake, moderate potassium intake, and high potassium intake. So I'll go between all those different scenarios. So scenario 1 of low potassium intake. The body conserves potassium, aldosterone is low, and you need to retain sodium. This can lead to bloating. Number 2, modern potassium intake. You reached a set amount. The system is in balance. No strong signals are sent. And number 3, high potassium intake. You exceed the set amount. And this is the trigger. The body detects the excess and activates the entire aldosterone-driven, sodium-excreting, debloating system to forcefully bring levels back down with ANP. And this is how it works, right? High potassium intake causes increased blood volume and pressure, which triggers ANP release, which causes sodium water excretion, which lowers blood volume and pressure. So these are the footnotes, and that's a lot of footnotes. But to get into why I mentioned 2004, the adequate intake for potassium is 4,700 milligrams per day, but this was for the average person in 2004 when this was made. The weight ranged around 191 pounds to 164 pounds, and this is because men weighed 191 pounds on average, and women weighed 164 pounds on average. So you add those two together, divided by 2 to get the average. And this was set and stated by the American National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, specifically the Food and Nutrition Board in 2004. And it is made in this context to balance out a high sodium diet from processed foods. So there's nuance to this. And now for the potassium and sodium ratios, right? Don't think of the 4,700 milligrams as a rigid system. This is because the ideal potassium to sodium ratio is around 2 to 1, and it has to be at least 1 to 1. But modern humans from their processed diet have around 1 to 2 as a ratio, which means that as a modern human being plagued with processed food, you need around 300% more potassium to balance things out for it to go from a 1 to 2 to a ratio of 4 to 2, which is a ratio of 2 to 1. Thus, if you have lower sodium, then your potassium needs to be lower. Clav says the ratio should be around 4 to 1, but be safe. A common question is, if high amounts of potassium elevates aldosterone, why does it still decrease bloating? Well, the answer to that is, basically, you put your body in more of a cautious state from elevated potassium, and the body is forced to flush it out, but at the same time, sodium is flushed out as collateral because of the sodium-potassium pump. So to further simplify, potassium debloats you even though it raises aldosterone, which bloats you, but the net final effect is still a less bloated face because of the sodium being excreted from the dangerous potassium levels to the urine through a rigid mechanism with AMP as a factor. And for the two sides of aldosterone, to further understand this nuance of aldosterone and potassium, it's that if you have aldosterone that is high in the body and potassium is low or normal, you bloat. But if your aldosterone is high because of potassium, then you debloat. An announcement is that this channel will go through a major revision, so the videos before this video would be probably deleted, or they will be altered to the point where they will have a disclaimer at the front, for obvious reasons. But yeah, thank you guys. Another announcement is that I'm getting more cooked. As you can see from my health indicators, pretty cooked. But I also want to say something else about the switch up. It's going to be more scientific and more rational based. Why is this, you ask? Well, it is because I teach you guys the methods, but I don't tell you the why. And for the LuxMaxing community to evolve in its expertise, I must let the people who view my channel be more well-informed to these biomechanical processes. That would mean that I have to inform them about the nuance and details of these processes so that more methods can be made from this information and not just blindly following my words, right? So that's really it. So peace out, guys. If you liked the video, subscribe, follow my social medias, and yeah, goodbye.